Ah, dear listeners, you've returned once more, and what a time to come back too. I must say your devotion to our efforts has certainly been noticed by the elder Scribes. Our last broadcast was received with such enthusiasm and interest that it has drawn the attention of the average citizens, and even the Necrologist Guild is seeing the effects. They have chosen to expand our funding for another year, and we will be putting it to good use. So expect more stories to come soon. Naturally, such a generous gesture comes with strings attached, unwelcomed but not unexpected. Still, we have the privilege today to bring you a message from the Necrologist Guild. The Undertaker Corps will be hosting recruitment drives through the next 2 months in the Mercury Plaza and at the entrance to the Prometheum Arena. If you or someone you know would like to aid in the defense of our city, the protection of our way of life, and fight against the nightmares that crawl through the fog of Urgast, seek your local alabaster officer and sign up. After all, the dead never stay dead for long in these streets. And now, let us return to our story and finally conclude the tale that started it all. The tale of Dr. Braga and the sacrifices he made to make our city whole and our future bright. Remember, listeners, our story today is a dramatization of our founder and leader. It is not meant to be taken literally, and the characters within are fictional. A tall tale, if you will. But don't let that stop you from enjoying yourself, from ending this thrilling story tonight. Dr. Braga still held the bomb to the lantern. One wrong move, and it would ignite the fuse, blowing all of them to bits. At this moment, both of them stared each other down, the tension mounting between them. Who would die? Who would leave? At this moment, Dr. Braga needed reason to triumph over fear. We can still find another way. The doctor remained resolute in his intentions. No one has to die here. No one else, you mean, the captain added through gritted teeth. Because that's all you've cared about until now, your own fucking skin. No, I'm done listening to your insipid words. We need a sacrifice for that fucking door to open, and you've outlived your usefulness. I only need one of you to get out of this mire-damned pit, and I can find a lot more uses for your little student on my ship when we're out. The implications of what he meant were enough to make Viviana's skin curl. She struggled harder now to get away from him, again with no success. The captain only held her tighter, and his wolfish grin grew wider. Dr. Braga had to think fast. He could feel his hands shaking and swallowed hard as he felt a knot forming in his throat. The captain hadn't taken the shot yet because he knew what would happen if he did, which meant he still valued self-preservation more than he feared being stuck here. It wasn't a lot to work with, but he didn't have all the time in the world either. Drastic measures, then. Where cunning and intellect failed, desperation and recklessness would have to suffice. So be it, then. Instead of igniting the bomb or putting it away, the doctor hurled the lantern at the sarcophagus, setting the sorcerer ablaze. The fire spread and roared with ferocity, making the captain flinch enough that Viviana was able to slip his grasp, but not before the captain took a shot at the doctor. He roared, "What have you done?" The doctor tossed himself behind the other side of the sarcophagus. He managed to avoid the captain's bullet. Mostly, the bullet managed to graze him on the arm, tearing open a wound as it slashed through. The doctor paused behind the sarcophagus to examine his arm. A grace might need stitches, but nothing too deep. He worked quickly to rip his sleeve off and wrap it around the wound to hold the bleeding. On the other side, the captain was struggling with his weapons, tossing his spent pistol to the side and pulling out 2 others. A standoff was building up between them as the fire spread. But then, they all stopped when they heard it. the hollowed rattle of ancient lungs exhaling dust and death. All eyes turned to the burning sarcophagus as they froze in their place with absolute dread. The sorcerer's withered and burning arm rose first. It grabbed hold of the sarcophagus's edge as he pulled himself up, a tattered ancient force, pulsing with a bone-chilling aura. The fire did little to stop him. It only added to the horror. The flames clung to his flesh, spreading through his withered robes, yet he did not burn. The visage of the mummy's scale-patched face, draped in fire, as if veiled by the mire itself, was an image that the doctor knew would become a recurring nightmare. With a slow, deliberate motion, the mummy raised his arm, curling his elongated fingers like a twisted puppeteer pulling on unseen strings. Then, with a sweep of his tattered sleeve, the fire that was on him collapsed within itself, coiling away into nothingness. Only smoke remained, draping the cursed mummy like death's cloak. Dr. Braga has seen many things in his life, many dark things, but nothing has ever struck him with as much fear as he felt in this moment. Out of all three of them, he was the closest to the mummy and in the most immediate danger. Every instinct within him screamed, "Move!" But his legs failed to respond. He didn't know if that was a good idea regardless. What would he do here anyway? The soldiers at the sacrificial chamber were one thing, but this one, his presence only screamed one thing: omnipotent. Viviana witnessed the unfolding horror from behind a pillar after she got away from the captain. Everything felt like it was spinning. Every breath she took didn't feel like it was enough. First the captain's descent into madness, and now this. She wanted to crawl into herself, a hole, a dark recess somewhere, anywhere to get away from this. In all her life, she never faced a fear as gripping and all-consuming as this. She peeked around the corner to see morbid curiosity pushing her onwards, only to see the mummy floating or barely touching the ground near the doctor. She stifled a gasp. What once was concern for the doctor now shifted to a deeper, gnawing fear for his survival. Then she saw it. The doctor stood up before the mummy and raised a hand. A fresh cut on his palm was dripping blood. The mummy turned and raised his own, fingers curling and readying for something. But before he did anything, the doctor began speaking. His words were not in the common tongue. They were something else, each syllable spoken aloud and reverberating with something unnatural. It was his voice, but something felt wrong. The doctor spoke louder, and now she could pick up more clearly what he was saying. He was speaking in Zultec, and yet, for all her years studying the Nawari and their culture, this Zultec speech felt different, old, eldritch. She paid closer attention. There were words she could make out, and she started mouthing them in whispers. The king's blood, his will, undone. Voice I speak. His will. She stuttered with the cadences, but she understood. It's a chant. She went over the sounds of what she heard in her mind, digging into her knowledge of Zultec culture, language, and myths. By the king's blood we rise. By his will all will be undone. Through the king's voice I speak. By his will I command you. It wasn't a hymn. It wasn't a plea for hope. He was speaking to the mummy, an invocation, a command. How did he know such a thing? Why would he think that it would work? She couldn't grasp what was happening or what he was doing, but after the third time he repeated the chant. The doctor went silent, and the fear she felt before turned to silent shock as she felt all color leave her skin when she witnessed the mummy bowing. The captain must have witnessed the same thing, because the growing, eerie silence was abruptly interrupted by the roaring sound of the captain's pistol being shot. The bullet was meant for the doctor, but the mummy quickly stood in its path, moving with a swiftness that resembled a cobra spreading open its hood. The captain tossed aside the pistol and drew his blade with shaking hands. To his courage, he was still standing, but even he couldn't hide his fear from what he was witnessing. What kind of monster are you?" He could have been asking that to the mummy itself for all the good it did him. But it was the doctor who answered. "I am the terror that persists." He spoke the Tsultek word with such authority. A command, one that the mummy responded to. The mummy focused his gaze on the captain. Struck with fear, the captain tossed his weapons and ran, trying to escape back to the temple, his flight instincts overtaking all reason. It didn't matter. The mummy raised his hand towards the captain and curled his fingers with intent. He turned his hand upward and moved his fingers around. The captain froze mid-step. Panic overtook him as he fell to his knees, begging, pleading for his life. But there was no mercy left in the chamber. Then, with a swift gesture filled with intent, the mummy sharply closed his webbed fist. The captain's pleads turned to a gurgling cry in his throat, and then into abrupt silence as his body contorted in unnatural ways. His body twitched and jerked as crimson spikes erupted from within him. It was his blood, twisted and hardened into piercing blades that burst out of his flesh. The captain's twisted body spasmed one more time before the blood liquefied again. But instead of falling along with his body, the blood pooled into an orb over his broken corpse, drained from what remained of his broken form. The mummy moved his hands once more towards himself, and the orb of blood followed his command, reshaping itself once more into a staff, solidifying in his hand as he descended to his feet and stood beside the doctor. Viviana watched on in horror. With the captain dead, she felt some sort of relief, but she didn't know what to expect next. Would the doctor turn that thing on her next? No, he wouldn't, would he? He fought so hard for her up to this point. She stepped out of the pillar and walked on shaking legs towards the mangled body of the captain, the man who held her hostage and made threats to use her on his ship. Somehow there was an instinct within her telling her that he wasn't the worst thing she had to fear. You did it." Her voice cracked through shallow breaths, drier than she thought possible. "It's over. I'm afraid." The doctor's voice, once a beacon of calm, now sent a chill down her spine. "It isn't." She felt frozen in place, but she realized something grim. It wasn't out of fear. She couldn't just move from where she was. She couldn't move at all. Her body wasn't paralyzed. She was being held in place by forces she couldn't see. But not for long. Suddenly, she felt as if the ground was moving beneath her. It wasn't. She was being pulled against her will, and knowing that it must be the mummy using its power what was moving her, struck her to her core. She was still facing the captain, but now the doctor was walking from behind her. Each step he took echoed in the chamber more loudly than it should have to her. The door still demands a price to open, and the captain's blood will not do. She wanted to speak, wanted to scream, the questions roaring in her mind as loud as her thoughts would get. Why was he doing this? How? What was he doing? How long had he been lying to her? The questions thundered in her mind. She wanted to scream them at the top of her lungs, but she couldn't utter a single word. She was helpless. The knot in her throat, the feeling of her chest tightening and her heart pounding faster than it ever has, were all swiftly replaced by the cold press of a blade through her chest. I assure you, I take no pleasure in this, but a sacrifice must be paid, a pure one, and I couldn't think of anyone more pure than you are. Know that everything that happens now, all the greatness I will achieve from this moment, will be thanks to your sacrifice today. The tears fell from her eyes faster than the blood from her new wound. The feeling of betrayal struck her deeper than anything the doctor or the mummy could do to her now. All she could feel with her dying breath, as everything went dark, was one thing and one thing only: regret. Even under the sorcerer's spell, Dr. Braga could see how hard Viviana struggled to regain control of herself. Had she been a weaver, she may have stood a chance. Perhaps she will find comfort in the next life, though the doctor very much doubted she would. He had the courtesy to wait until she was dead to do what came next. At his command, the mummy twisted the blade, widening the wound before extracting her heart. He placed it gently upon the plinth and began chanting in that ancient Zultec tongue. The archaic resonance of that language's mixed with the mummy's dried and withered voice truly sounded like something otherworldly in nature. But it was working. In the end, he meant what he said. Without her pure heart, this would not work, meaning he would not reach his goal without her. After a few verses, the mummy waved his hand over the heart, and it began beating, slowly, unnaturally. It started producing blood from its chambers, filling the plinth, and then the canal that went from it to the door. Eventually, the blood reached the door, while the sorcerer continued chanting. Blood filled the intricate carvings across the stone, and deep within, ancient mechanisms groaned to life. Once the elaborate door was filled with blood, the sounds of the stone shifting and groaning stopped for a moment, and the door lurched, its form dividing in two, before it opened the rest of the way, its weight making it groan as it opened to reveal the chamber within. Here the sorcerer hovered to the door and lowered his head again, waiting for its next command like a loyal servant. Meanwhile, the doctor stepped forward, reveling in the moment of his triumph. All the sacrifices, every reputation he betrayed, every bridge he burned, and all the blood on his hands, all led to this one moment. The chamber stood more massive than the one where the sorcerer was. At the center stood a raised altar, surrounded by stairways with canals leading to intricate patterns on the floor. The altar was built atop the river and inside a cave, yet to this day the altar flowed with blood, and there was the beating of a heart. As Dr. Braga ascended the altar steps, getting closer to the thunderous beating heart at the top, basked in its magnificence. He could see it now in all its macabre glory, uttering its name with shivering lips and shaken words that felt like experiencing a fever dream. The fountain of scarlet triumph. It was a ghastly thing to anyone else, a fountain made of the obsidian-like vermilium, polished and sculpted to the shape of a dark red serpent bearing its fangs, and coiled around a stone pedestal that held a massive still-beating heart in place at its center, a monstrous organ the size of a carriage with 3 chambers. Each beat echoed through the chamber with booming reverberations, and each beat emitted a pulse of radiant energy from it. After all these years, the doctor approached the fountain and reached into its pools of blood. He could feel a tingling sensation rippling through his body as his blood merged with the blood of the fountain, and then he pulled out his hand, the last proof he needed. He looked at his hand stained with blood, but healing underneath. The gash he cut into his arm to command the mummy was now sealing, and even the wound from the captain's bullet was also closing up. He'd done it. He found it. The ancient lost secret of the Zultec Empire. Oh, how he could weep with joy. He stood there, a cackle erupting from within, the satisfaction of years of research paying off. Now then, Dr. Braga reached into his coat and pulled out his trusty journal and began scanning through the pages, notes and sketched of this very room and the fountain within, detailed maps of the area with circled features and scribbled notes. A layout for a city with a factory planned right atop this temple, and above it all a name, written with care and underlined with emphasis: Nethermore. Now we can begin the true task ahead. Such a twisted end to such a twisted tale. Truly, there is no price too great to pay for a man with ambition, is there? But again, remember, this is fiction, meant only to ignite the spark of curiosity and pique the interest of our citizens. Nothing more. Still, I would say our scribes are capable of wondrous takes, are they not? Truly, the captain alone was a character worth more looking into. After all, the Scourged Legion are quite the collection of brigands and bandits.
Don't listen to what the scribes say. They've been bought. Their tales are not what they seem. Look to the Wanderer's light for answers.
The same things too, but this will have to suffice for today. But don't worry, our journey through the archives are only starting. What else will we find? What other tales will we bring to you? The citizenry of Nethermoor. Come back next time when we explore the origins of one of the Scourged Legion's darkest legends. A man whose name is whispered about in dark alleys and in children's stories. A man whose bloodthirst is unmatched to this day. We will bring you the tale of the immortal plunderer. Until then, be sure to collect the playbill version of our stories, the full tale collected and etched into paper. It would go a long way to support our growing efforts, and all contributions are put to use in our station. It is your coin that keeps us afloat, regardless of what the guild might think of themselves. If not, even spreading the word of our broadcast and sharing our tales with others can help. Each step taken towards the past opens the path to a brighter future. Until next we turn the page, dear listeners, keep your eyes open to the unknown